Good evening. We are witnessing a failure of presidential leadership at a time when this country, when we, the people, need it more than ever, perhaps in our lifetime. Tonight, with flashbang grenades going off and tear gas in the air, the President of the United States, a wannabe wartime president, had what he hoped was his MacArthur moment, his patent promise. Calling himself our law and order president, he said he'll send active duty military troops into American states and cities to dominate, his words, dominate demonstrators in the wake of the police killing of George Floyd a week ago. What happened in this past hour would be comical if it wasn't so dangerous and so destructive. The president spoke from the Rose Garden, and even as he declared himself, quote, that ally of all peaceful protesters, troops, Secret Service members, and mounted police were moving on what, until moments before, had been a peaceful crowd in Lafayette Park across from the White House. You're seeing what happened right there. That had been a peaceful crowd. Throughout his brief remarks, forces of what he called law and order were creating chaos unlike anything seen in Washington in decades. As you listen to what the president said, we're going to show you also what was happening at the exact same moment, just a couple hundred yards away.
I am mobilizing all available federal resources, civilian and military, to stop the rioting and looting, to end the destruction and arson, and to protect the rights of law-abiding Americans, including your Second Amendment rights. Therefore, the following measures are going into effect immediately. First, we are ending the riots and lawlessness that has spread throughout our country. We will end it now. Today, I have strongly recommended to every governor to deploy the National Guard in sufficient numbers that we dominate the streets. Mayors and governors must establish an overwhelming law enforcement presence until the violence has been quelled. If a city or state refuses to take the actions that are necessary to defend the life and property of their residents, then I will deploy the United States military and quickly solve the problem for them.
So, a lot to unpack there. The president threatening to use unprecedented military force on U.S. soil while offering a preview of it on the streets of Washington. Now, you might wonder, why did the police, why were they ordered to move on protesters at that moment? Obviously, the president wanted a photo op, and in a moment, right after he spoke, we learned exactly what that photo op would be. The president wanted peaceful protesters, the kind he said he just supports. He wanted them out of the way for his photo op. It was simultaneously outrageous and dangerous. Now, that's the president starting his very short walk to a nearby church. With him were Ivanka Trump, who you'll probably see at one moment. She's in high heels, clutching a white purse. The defense secretary, was there. Mark Meadows, the new chief of staff. All of them in a very kind of scatterbrain way, walking to a nearby church for a photo op. And then I want to show you what actually happened once the president got to the church. Even if it meant tear gassing peaceful protesters, hitting them with flashbangs, pepper spray, and rubber bullets, somebody handed the president that Bible, and then he stood there, and that was it. That was the photo op. The church itself is shut down.
That's my thoughts.
We're a great country, that's my thought. That was his photo op. And then, really awkwardly, he asked the Attorney General and the Defense Secretary, really anybody else he could kind of get to come into. Kayleigh McEnany was dragged into this photo op, to stand in front of St. John's Episcopal Church, not to pray, not to confess, certainly. We know the president doesn't do that. No, he went to just stand outside, hold up the Bible, and then have photos taken of himself with his cabinet members. It was surreal. A photo op at the church that he rarely attends. His daughter and son-in-law also on hand. Let me just say something about what the president has just shown us. The president of law and order, as he now calls himself, which is how he pronounced himself, and then he claimed a power he doesn't really have. He can't send the military into every state. That's not law and order. What the president doesn't seem to know or care is that the vast majority of those protesting, they too are calling for law and order. A black man killed with 4 officers holding him down, a knee to the neck, for more than 8 minutes, nearly 3 minutes of which he was no longer conscious for. That's not law and order. That's murder. Stopping and frisking a young black man simply because he's a young black man, that's not law and order. The killing of George Floyd, Eric Garner, the torture of Abner Louima, that's not law and order. The president seems to think that dominating black people, dominating peaceful protesters is law and order. It's not. He calls them thugs. Who is the thug here? Hiding in a bunker? Hiding behind a suit? Who is the thug? People have waited for days for this wannabe wartime president to say something. And this is what he says, and that is what he does. I've seen societies fall apart as a reporter. I've seen people dying in the streets while protesting. I've seen countries ripped apart by hate and misinformation and lies and political demagogues and racism. We can't let that happen here. Of course, violence is no answer, but people protesting deserve answers, and they haven't gotten them, no matter how many black men have been murdered, lynched, imprisoned, mistreated, redlined, blackballed from jobs. We all know it. People protesting in the streets, they know it, and they're tired of it. And we should be too. There's a curfew in New York tonight at 11 p.m. And we remember another curfew, August 1943. That was the last time there was a curfew like this in the city. And you know what that curfew was caused by? 1943, a white police officer shooting a black soldier. The years change, the decades go by, and the sad truth remains. Let's go first right now to CNN's Alex Marquardt, who was on the street in the crowd just as the mayhem broke out in Washington. I shouldn't even say mayhem broke out. The peaceful protesters were pushed out, and that's what caused mayhem. He's with the protesters now and the police line. Alex, explain what you have seen, what's going on now.
I'm with the few protesters who remain, Anderson. The president, in his remarks, said that the 7 p.m. curfew would be strictly enforced, and it has been. This was a curfew that was put down by the mayor of Washington, D.C., not by the federal government, of course. And now the streets, at least around the White House, where I have been for most of the day, are predominantly controlled, well, certainly controlled, but predominantly occupied by law enforcement. What you're looking at here is a row of D.C. Metropolitan Police. We have just been pushed back from the intersection that you can see down there, where there's a lot more police. They carried out this maneuver that was almost like a lasso, allowing the press to go out, but wrapping around the remaining protesters and presumably arresting them. They are still up there. Anderson, you were mentioning the made-for-TV moment that we saw earlier. It was extraordinary in the moments leading up to that speech by the president, in which he declared that he was the law enforcement president. On cue, the police forces in the police, so D.C. National Guard and the U.S. Park Police, along with Secret Service, they pushed forward and started aggressively pushing the protesters away from the park. They didn't use, it wasn't just a please move away, we're getting close to the curfew kind of thing. It was with force. It was with horses. It was with tear gas. It was with pepper spray. It was with rubber bullets. I saw an older man getting cornered in an entryway who was getting fired upon with rubber bullets. Protesters going out to try to help him under a hail of rubber bullets. They managed to carry him away. He looked like he was having some heart trouble. So some incredibly disturbing scenes playing out here, Anderson, tonight. It is the kind of thing, as you noted in your remarks earlier, it's the kind of thing that I've also seen in places like Turkey and places like Egypt between Israelis and Palestinians. These are not countries that we should want to be compared to. It is an understatement to say that, to pair the president's remarks that I was listening to in my ear with the scenes that were unfolding in front of me, to say that that was surreal is certainly an understatement, Anderson.
Yeah, well, El-Sisi is the president's favorite dictator. Apparently that's what the president said to El-Sisi. Alex Marquardt, thanks very much.